Imagine dedicating 20 entire years of your life to just one single defining goal.
Right, that is a massive chunk of time to be focused on one thing.
It really is. Picture the sheer willpower you would need to wake up every single day with one highly specific image in your mind.
Yeah.
You work for it, you sacrifice your personal life for it, and you endure rejection after rejection.
Oh, absolutely. The toll that takes on a person is huge.
Yeah, but you just keep pushing. And then finally, the moment arrives. You cross the finish line, you get the uniform, you get the security badge.
Should be the best day of your life.
Exactly. But almost instantly, that 2-decade-long dream morphs into this visceral, waking nightmare. A nightmare that systematically dismantles your mental health, drains your finances, and completely shatters your sense of self.
Wow. That is a genuinely terrifying premise.
Today, we are looking at what happens when the summit you have spent your whole life climbing turns out to be a cliff edge. And the fall is just, well, it's devastating.
We are so culturally conditioned to believe in the absolute virtue of perseverance, aren't we? I mean, we have this ingrained narrative that reaching the goal is the ironclad guarantee of a happy ending.
Oh, totally. Like the hard work is the only obstacle.
Right. But we very rarely talk about the psychological phenomenon of the arrival fallacy. And worse, what happens when the destination itself is fundamentally toxic? When the institution you have idolized turns out to be a machine that just grinds you down to the bone?
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. The source material on our desk today is a remarkably intense, incredibly raw document. It is a personal manifesto stretching over 40 pages, written by a man named Charles Pinto.
And the title he gave it is pretty striking.
Yeah, he titled it, rather appropriately, The End of the Dream. It serves as a first-hand, highly detailed account of his career as a flight attendant, a career which ultimately culminated in his time at a major flagship carrier, British Airways.
I think we need to be really careful to set the parameters for how we are analyzing this source material today.
That's a great point. How should we frame this for the listener?
Well, we are not looking at a standard, sanitized human resources grievance file here, or, a dry corporate consultant's report. This is a deeply emotional, highly subjective testimony from a man in the midst of a severe crisis.
Right, it's very raw.
Exactly. Our mission here isn't to audit his claims for a court of law. It's to rigorously examine the themes Charles presents. He's giving us a real-time look at profound psychological trauma, systemic isolation, and the devastating breakdown of institutional support systems.
And I want to be crystal clear with you, listening right now. We are analyzing this document impartially. We are exploring Charles's stated claims and his deeply personal experiences.
Yeah, it's important to establish that boundary.
For sure. We are not here to take sides in a legal battle, nor are we here to definitively endorse claims against specific corporations like British Airways or the BASA Union, which he names extensively throughout his text. Our goal is to dive into the human elements of this text.
Which are incredibly compelling on their own.
They really are. Today we're diving into a story about the aviation industry, yes, but at its core, it's about what happens when the structures meant to support us completely collapse. It's about discrimination, xenophobia, and what happens when human cries for help just vanish into a corporate void.
It functions as a fascinating, if harrowing, case study in organizational psychology and human resilience. I mean, to truly grasp the devastating depths of his eventual collapse, we have to start by understanding the staggering height of the pedestal he placed this dream upon.
We really need to look at the foundation of his ambition. So let's start at the very beginning of the timeline he provides.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Charles grew up in Brazil, specifically in a favela in Guarulhos. And for context, Guarulhos is home to the major international airport serving São Paulo.
So he was literally right next to the aviation world from day one.
Exactly. He describes himself as a young boy constantly staring up at the sky. He had a remarkably difficult childhood, actually. He mentions losing his mother at age 8 and essentially having to become an adult overnight to survive. Oh my God, at 8 years old?
Yeah, he didn't have a traditional family safety net to protect him at all. So his escape, his imagination, his entire concept of a better future was directed upward at these metal birds, as he calls them. That geographical proximity to the airport is doing a lot of heavy lifting psychologically.
How so?
Well, if you were a child in a highly vulnerable environment like a favela, dealing with profound neglect and the acute trauma of losing your primary caregiver, the airplanes taking off represent something incredibly powerful.
Like a literal escape route.
Yes, they aren't just transportation. They represent the ultimate literal and metaphorical escape. They represent order, safety, structure, and a way out of poverty. And he fixated heavily on one specific livery.
Right, and by livery we mean the specific paint scheme, the branding, and the colors on the fuselage of the aircraft.
Exactly. He became obsessed with the blue, red, and white of British Airways. He describes knowing that exact silhouette by heart long before he could even read the name painted on the side of the plane.
And the persistence he describes to get there is just staggering. From the age of 18, he spends 20 years knocking on that specific door.
20 years.
20 years of applying, being refused, regrouping, and returning. But, while he is relentlessly chasing that ultimate prize, he obviously has to survive. He has to work and build his career in the aviation industry in the meantime.
Which brings us to a really fascinating detour in his document, his time working for Ryanair.
I'm so glad he included this section.
It is a crucial section of his manifesto because it establishes a baseline for Charles's character and his professional work ethic.
Right, because later on we have to evaluate his claims about breaking down, so we need to know how he handles stress.
Precisely. If we are going to critically evaluate his later claims of systemic failure and his own mental collapse, we really need to understand what kind of employee he was in different highly demanding environment.
Because Ryanair is notoriously demanding. I mean, he doesn't sugarcoat it at all. He describes it as a grueling environment.
It's legendary for how hard the crews work.
He talks about doing 4 sectors a day. And for those unfamiliar with the operational rhythm, a sector is a single flight from point A to point B.
So 4 sectors means 4 distinct flights, 4 intense takeoffs, 4 landings.
Yeah, and no night stops at fancy hotels either. He paints a picture of doing a double Stansted to Dublin rotation. Those flights are maybe 30-40 minutes long in the air.
Barely enough time to reach cruising altitude.
Exactly. And in that tiny window, the crew has to execute 6 different services.
It is an absolute breathless sprint. The turnaround times are famously tight there. He lists the duties in the document, and it's just exhausting to read.
What were some of the things he had to do?
Newspaper and magazine distribution, taking hot meal orders, executing a full bar service, selling scratch cards, aggressively pushing duty-free sales, selling bus and train tickets for the destination city.
All on a 30-minute flight?
And then physically cleaning the cabin before the next wave of passengers boards. He notes that you literally have no time to even drink a sip of water, and when you finally get back to base, you are essentially a zombie.
It's a highly pressurized, metrics-driven environment.
It operates on razor-thin margins and maximum efficiency.
But here's what I found so surprising reading his account. Despite that bone-deep exhaustion, he loved it.
He really did.
He expresses profound, genuine gratitude for his time there. He calls it an incredible school, and the reasons he gives are so telling about what actually makes a workplace functional.
What did he point out specifically?
He says he learned the true meaning of teamwork. There was zero drama, no crew members acting like what he calls princesses. Everyone, from the newest hire to the most senior flight attendant, was in the trenches together.
What he is describing there is the psychology of shared hardship.
Right. Misery loves company, but in a productive way.
Exactly. Sometimes the grueling nature of the work itself can forge a genuine, unbreakable camaraderie among a crew. They operate as a single unit out of sheer necessity. And crucially, he was rewarded for his hustle.
Yes, the financial aspect was huge for him.
He explicitly mentioned seeing his bank account balance go over £2,000 for the first time in his entire life. For someone who grew up in a favela with absolutely nothing, that financial stability is immensely validating.
And he earned it entirely through his own relentless hard work.
It proves to us, the readers, that Charles isn't afraid of hard work. He isn't someone looking for a cushy, easy ride. He actually thrives in a high-hustle environment, provided there is fairness, clear expectations, and a sense of team cohesion.
He even includes a photo of an old cabin crew assessment form from his Ryanair days to prove his point.
Oh, I remember that part.
Yeah, and the assessor's comments are glowing. It reads, very polite with passengers, very active, good teamwork, amazing seller. The assessor literally wrote, just the perfect cabin crew.
So he has the receipts. He is demonstrably, objectively good at this job.
He absolutely is. But as much as he respected the hustle of Ryanair, it wasn't his peak in the industry. He eventually transitions to Norwegian Air Shuttle, and the tone of his writing shifts dramatically.
It really does. The way he writes about Norwegian is almost poetic. It becomes deeply sensory and highly emotional.
He point-blank calls it the best airline ever, in all caps. He fixates on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft they flew, which he affectionately refers to as the red lipstick because of the distinct red nose on the aircraft's livery.
That's such a lovely detail.
And he talks about the crew meal trolleys being an absolute paradise stocked with Norwegian chocolate, the great hotel layovers, and specifically the incredible bond he formed with the Thai crew members.
The cultural mix there seemed really positive for him.
Yeah, he mentions a line checker he called Mama who would bring him spicy noodles.
The emotional resonance of those specific details is what really stands out to me. The spicy noodles, the chocolate, the specific familial nicknames like Mama.
It's very personal.
Exactly. He isn't talking about corporate policy or organizational flowcharts. He's talking about a profound sense of belonging. He had found a family. He felt seen, valued, and culturally embraced.
He even mentions feeling like a Japanese anime character he loved as a kid, a warrior, while living in Norway, learning the language and navigating this new culture.
It represents a period of immense psychological safety and genuine professional joy.
It's sort of like finding a hidden gem of a restaurant in your neighborhood. You know, it might not have that elusive 3-star Michelin rating that you initially obsessed over when you're a young, ambitious culinary student.
Right, but the actual experience is better.
Exactly. The food is incredible, the family running the place treats you like one of their own, and you suddenly realize you are happier working the line in that chaotic kitchen than you've ever been in your entire life.
That is a very apt analogy. He had found his niche. He found an environment that didn't just tolerate his energy and background, but actively celebrated it.
And this establishes such a crucial baseline for us.
We have to keep this contrast firmly in our minds as we move forward. Charles was a highly capable, emotionally resilient, deeply passionate aviation professional who thrived in demanding, exhausting environments when he felt a sense of community and institutional support.
He was not a fragile employee by any means.
Not at all.
But that resilience isn't infinite, because he didn't stop at Norwegian. That 20-year obsession with the blue, red, and white metal bird, the one he watched from the favela, was still burning in the back of his mind.
The arrival fallacy kicks in.
Yes. And finally, the day arrives, April 4th, 2022. 4 days before his 37th birthday, he finally puts on the British Airways uniform. He writes that he thought it would be the absolute best day of his life.
But the reality was an immediate, violent shock to his system. He writes, "In the blink of an eye, the most beautiful dream of his life became his worst nightmare."
Because the dream shatters almost immediately upon arrival. In his very first month on the job, he experiences a severe incident of xenophobia that essentially sets the tone for the complete psychological unraveling that follows.
This is a critical moment to analyze deeply because it serves as the inciting incident of his trauma within this specific corporate ecosystem. Let's look closely at exactly what he claims happened on that aircraft.
Okay, so he is in the middle of his duties, specifically making a passenger announcement over the PA system. A colleague approaches him and abruptly asks if he is British.
Just out of nowhere.
Yeah, he says no. And then she tells him directly to his face that his English is, quote, disgusting, and that he should return to his country.
We really need to pause and examine the specific use of the word disgusting here.
It's a very harsh word.
It is. This isn't a professional critique of his grammar. It isn't constructive feedback on his enunciation or clarity over the public address system. From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, the concept of disgust is deeply tied to pathogen avoidance.
Pathogen avoidance, like avoiding disease.
Exactly. It's the emotion we feel toward things we want to expel from our environment to stay safe, like spoiled food or an infection.
That makes a lot of sense.
To apply that specific word to a person's language, which is inherently tied to their identity, their culture, their origins, their very being, is an act of profound linguistic violence and prejudice. It is designed to make the target feel less than human, like an infection in the space that needs to be cleansed.
Wait, I want to push back on something here, or at least ask for some clarification. I mean, I understand it's an incredibly hurtful xenophobic comment, but his physical reaction seems incredibly extreme.
How does he describe it?
He describes experiencing an immediate brain fog. He says his brain collapsed instantly. He claims he literally blacked out, like he cannot remember the woman's face, he cannot remember her name.
Total memory loss of the event.
Yeah, he doesn't know how he managed to finish the 2 flights that day or how he physically got home. Can a single comment cause a literal physiological blackout like that?
It sounds extreme if we frame it just as an insult, but we have to view this through the lens of trauma psychology. What he is describing is a severe dissociative response triggered by an amygdala hijack.
Can you break down what an amygdala hijack actually is in this context? Because that sounds terrifying.
Certainly. The amygdala is the part of the brain that processes fear and threat. Charles is in a high-stakes environment. He's trapped in an aluminum tube miles above the Earth, performing a highly visible job he has idolized for 20 years.
So he's already at a high baseline of alertness.
Right. And suddenly, he is hit with a profound existential threat to his safety and identity from a colleague. His brain's fight-or-flight system is instantly activated.
But he can't fight and he can't fly away.
Exactly. He can't fight his colleague, and he literally cannot flee the aircraft. So his central nervous system defaults to the third option, which is freeze and dissociation.
Wow, so the brain just shuts down.
The brain essentially pulls the plug to protect the psyche from the acute, overwhelming pain of that discrimination. It suppresses the memory encoding process. He even mentions later in the document that this might be why he got a large blackout tattoo.
The black ink covering his arm?
Yes. The body and the mind literally keep the score of these traumatic impacts, manifesting as memory loss and physical brain fog.
That makes a lot more sense when you explain the biology of feeling trapped like that. And unfortunately, it wasn't an isolated incident.
It rarely is in these types of environments.
This single moment ripped open a void, but he claims the environment as a whole was fundamentally toxic. He writes that a staggering 90% of his flights were traumatic.
90%.
Yeah.
That is an unlivable ratio.
He felt that in almost every single flight, he was targeted, mocked, or tortured by someone. He was constantly terrified to make announcements, begging other crew members to do the PA while he did the safety demo in the aisles.
Just to avoid speaking.
Yeah, just to avoid the risk of hearing that his English was disgusting again.
This creates a chronic state of hypervigilance. He is no longer operating as a flight attendant focused on service and safety. He is operating as a trauma survivor, constantly scanning his environment for the next inevitable attack.
That sounds neurologically exhausting.
It is. And he describes a culture that completely inverted the positive values he learned at Ryanair. He says that at BA, doing your job well was actually grounds for accusation.
That part really threw me. He talks about actively trying to help galley leaders or doing announcements in his native Portuguese on flights to Brazil or Portugal to help customers and elevate the brand's premium international image.
Which you would think management would love.
Right. But in return for taking initiative, he gets hostility. He was told that asking for help was recorded as a weakness. I mean, have you ever been in a workplace where trying to be helpful actually makes you a target for bullying? It's completely crazy-making.
It's a classic, well-documented symptom of a deeply dysfunctional organizational culture. When a workplace operates on fear, scarcity, and internal politics, competence is viewed as competition.
So they see him as a threat.
Exactly. If you have a crew that is perhaps insecure, deeply burnt out, or entrenched as a rigid hierarchy, and someone comes in with the eager, bordering on desperate energy of someone who just achieved a 20-year dream, that energy isn't welcomed as an asset.
It's resented.
It's resented as a disruption. They try to cut the tall poppy down to maintain the status quo.
And he makes it abundantly clear that this wasn't just happening to him in a vacuum. The xenophobia, the prejudice, it was systemic.
He provides other examples.
He specifically mentions a crew from Madrid who were also disparaged, mocked, and marginalized for their English by other staff. It paints a picture of a culture that had, in his view, a deep-seated hostility toward non-native speakers and foreigners.
Which is incredibly ironic.
Right, despite being the flagship carrier for an international, globalized nation.
This raises a massive question about corporate cognitive dissonance. You have an airline that flies globally, relies entirely on international talent to operate its routes, and spends millions promoting a cosmopolitan, welcoming brand image to the public.
But the inside tells a different story.
Yet the internal culture he describes is heavily insular, prejudiced, and fiercely punitive towards diversity. That friction, the massive gap between the external PR branding and the grueling internal reality, is exactly what grinds employees down to dust.
It creates a surreal environment.
It does. The employee feels like they're going insane.
Yes.
Because the company claims to be one thing while acting as another.
But you can't live in a state of constant hypervigilance and cognitive dissonance forever. Eventually, the psychological toll demands a physical price. You can only run a machine in the red for so long before the engine violently blows.
The physical breakdown is inevitable.
And for Charles, that physiological bill came due. By August of 2024, his body is entering full systemic failure. He developed severe health problems.
The human body is simply not designed to sustain chronic, high-level stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline over a period of years without severe physiological consequences.
What actually happens to the body under that kind of prolonged stress?
Well, the immune system weakens, sleep architecture is destroyed, and the cardiovascular system is heavily strained. It manifests as very real physical illness.
He details a disastrous annual training session. He couldn't sleep for 5 days straight leading up to and during it.
5 days of insomnia is dangerous.
His body was literally screaming for help, trying to force him to stop and rest, but he felt he couldn't afford to fail. And on the bus ride home from that training, the engine finally blew.
He had a panic attack.
He suffered a massive public panic attack on public transport. He describes being completely destroyed, sobbing uncontrollably in his full uniform, while strangers stared at him in fear and confusion.
And we have to look at the compounding factors here, because trauma rarely happens in a vacuum. It wasn't just the relentless workplace bullying.
What else was going on in his life at that time?
In that exact same window of time, he is dealing with severe domestic issues. He mentions feeling like a prisoner in his own home, going so far as to wedge a chair under his door handle at night, just to try and feel safe enough to sleep.
Oh my goodness, that's terrifying.
And on top of that personal chaos, a regional airline in Brazil, Passaredo, suffered a tragic, fatal crash. Charles had friends who worked there, and he spent an entire day desperately calling their phones, getting only terrifying silence in return.
It's an unimaginable layering of trauma, the perfect storm. His foundation is cracking at home, his community is struck by a fatal tragedy, and his dream job is a daily psychological battleground where he is treated with disgust.
The dam was going to break.
And it broke in the most public, humiliating, and structurally damning way possible at Heathrow Airport.
The sequence on the air bridge is perhaps the most chilling, defining part of the entire manifesto.
Yeah.
It perfectly encapsulates the collision of a severe human medical crisis with total institutional empathy failure.
It is where the failure of the system becomes undeniable. Let's set the scene exactly as he describes it.
Okay.
He is on the air bridge. That's the physical enclosed tunnel connecting the terminal gate to the door of the aircraft. Passengers are actively disembarking from a flight. Charles suffers a colossal, debilitating panic attack right there.
Right in front of everyone.
Yes, he is fully in tears, physically shaking, unable to control his breathing or his body, completely exposed in his uniform as hundreds of people walk past him. The captain of the flight sees this happening.
And the captain followed procedure, right?
The captain recognizes the medical emergency and calls the office to request immediate medical or HR support to come to the aircraft to assist a crew member in distress.
And what we have to understand is that an airport air bridge is a highly secure, heavily monitored, deeply controlled environment.
Right. There are protocols for everything.
Exactly. If there's an emergency, there are protocols. But the protocol failed here.
Utterly failed. Because after the captain makes the call for help, nobody came.
Nobody came. Let that sink in for a moment.
It's hard to even comprehend.
An employee is having a severe acute medical episode in a high-security zone. The commander of the aircraft formally requests assistance, and the massive institution's response is a complete and total void.
Just radio silence.
It is the bystander effect magnified to a corporate level.
And because nobody comes, the situation degrades into a modern nightmare. Charles realizes he has to leave the air bridge to avoid delaying the aircraft's next movement and causing operational issues.
So he has to walk.
He is forced to walk through Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest, most crowded transit hubs in the entire world, in the middle of a continuous, severe panic attack. He describes an eternal walk.
And people were filming him, weren't they?
Yeah, passengers are literally pulling out their smartphones, taking pictures, and filming him in his most humiliated, vulnerable state.
The horror of modern surveillance. You are no longer allowed to just have a breakdown. You become a spectacle, content for someone else's social media feed in your darkest moment.
And in his sheer desperation to escape the cameras and the staring eyes, he finds a public toilet and locks himself inside for over an hour, just sitting on the floor trying to survive the physiological storm of the panic attack completely alone.
The isolation in that moment must have been overwhelming.
When he finally manages to drag himself to the Crew Report Center, the CRC, he is looking for sanctuary. He is looking for human help.
But that's not what he gets.
No. He claims that crew members in the office actually laughed at him as he arrived, disheveled and covered in tears. He is then taken into a briefing room and forced to repeat the traumatic details of his breakdown 5 separate times to 5 different people.
What's fascinating and deeply horrifying from an HR perspective here is the catastrophic failure of basic human empathy and the weaponization of bureaucracy.
Why do they make him repeat it so many times?
Making a trauma survivor recount their inciting incident multiple times to different low-level managers is a known form of secondary trauma.
So if it's known to be harmful, why is it standard procedure to make someone tell the story 5 times?
Because it isn't about care, it's an interrogation under the guise of procedure. It is about liability management. The institution needs to document exactly what happened, establish a timeline, and figure out their own exposure to risk.
They just need the paperwork sorted.
They need the facts on record. But by prioritizing the documentation over the immediate psychological stabilization of the employee, they actively harm the individual. They're treating him as a liability to be processed, not a patient to be cared for.
And the institutional silence that followed this event is deafening. Charles submits his official medical sickness certificate to British Airways around August 4th. He actually includes a screenshot of the text messages in his manifesto to prove this.
So they knew he was formally signed off.
Yes. BA does not make contact with him until August 14th. 10 days of total silence after a public breakdown, he refers to them as ghosts.
10 days of ignored requests for support.
When they finally do send a text message saying they want to give him space, he responds angrily. He asks for space to breathe, viewing their sudden check-in as a hollow, box-ticking exercise after abandoning him when he was literally crying on the air bridge.
This is the ultimate manifestation of a concept called institutional betrayal.
Institutional betrayal, what exactly does that mean in this context?
Institutional betrayal occurs when an organization you depend on for your safety, livelihood, and identity fails to protect you, or actively causes you harm, and then covers it up or ignores it.
Which is exactly what he felt happen.
When he acutely needed them, they vanished. When their internal procedure finally dictated they needed to check a box to show they had reached out, they sent a text. It is entirely transactional, completely devoid of empathy.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Surely you'd think the union is there to step in. That's their entire purpose, right? To protect the vulnerable worker from the cold machinery of the corporation.
You would hope so.
Charles goes to BASA, the union representing the cabin crew, and their alleged response is just, well, I had to read it twice.
What'd they tell him?
They allegedly tell him, we know this is happening, we know the bullying occurs, but we can't do anything about it because we don't have enough reports to speak with BA.
It is a staggering abdication of responsibility.
But isn't it standard, even necessary, for a union to require documented patterns before launching a full-scale grievance against a massive flagship airline? If I'm a union rep, I need a paper trail, I need data, right? Why is asking for procedural reports inherently malicious?
It isn't malicious in a vacuum, but it becomes malicious in practice when the procedure ignores the reality of the workplace culture.
How so?
Yes, unions need data. But this puts the burden of fixing a systemic culture of bullying entirely onto the shoulders of the terrified, traumatized victims. If the culture is one where people are actively afraid to speak up, which Charles explicitly states is the case.
Right, he said people resign because they are too scared to speak out.
Exactly. Then requiring a critical mass of official reports before acting guarantees that absolutely nothing will ever change. It creates an impossible catch-22.
I see, so it just protects the system.
It is a system designed to maintain the status quo by paralyzing the victims with procedural hurdles. The union hides behind the lack of paperwork to avoid confronting the toxic culture.
And that bureaucratic paralysis leads us to a critical pivot in his life, and honestly the most devastating part of this document, because the emotional and physical abandonment was terrible. But the final nail in the coffin was how this severe medical crisis instantly translated into acute, terrifying financial ruin.
This is where we see the machinery of the corporation grind the individual down to the bone.
It's all about the financial impact now.
We have to look closely at the financial weaponization of sickness in the UK system as he experienced it.
And Charles brings the receipts. He provides actual screenshots of his payslips and his medical documents right there in the manifesto.
He lays it all out.
He shows an NHS statement of fitness for work explicitly signing him off work for anxiety and depression. So there is documented, undeniable medical proof from a doctor of his severe psychological distress.
It's a formal medical diagnosis.
But what happens to his livelihood? While on this mandated medical leave, his basic salary is gutted. completely gutted.
He shows a payslip where his basic pay of 1,663 passes and 59 deals is completely wiped out.
It's replaced by a deduction, right?
Yes, a deduction labeled company sick pay for the exact same amount, negative 1,663.59 cents. After some statutory sick pay and tax adjustments are factored in, his net pay for the month is reduced to a staggering 646.78.
How does that math even work? How does a paycheck just zero out like that when you are legally signed off sick?
It comes down to the complex interplay between statutory sick pay, or SSP, which is the legal minimum the government requires, and occupational or company sick pay, which is an enhanced benefit provided by the employer.
Okay, so the company provides a top-up.
Often, yes. When an employee goes on long-term sick leave, company sick pay is used to top up the SSP so the employee receives their normal salary. However, company sick pay is usually discretionary or capped at a certain number of weeks.
So they can just take it away.
If an employee exhausts their company sick pay allowance, or if the company decides to withhold it due to disputes over the nature of the illness or procedural technicalities, the company payroll will initiate a clawback.
A clawback. That sounds aggressive.
They deduct the enhanced pay, leaving the employee with only the bare minimum statutory sick pay. In some chaotic payroll systems, if you were paid normally the previous months before the sickness was formally logged, the system will aggressively deduct the overpayment the following month, essentially zeroing out your ability to survive.
Imagine trying to survive in London, paying full rent on a flat by yourself, paying for utilities, trying to buy food on 646 hours a month, all while suffering from severe, debilitating panic attacks and suicidal ideation.
It's impossible.
He asks the reader directly in the text, "Do you know I pay a full flat on myself? Do you know if I have money to buy food?" It's a terrifying financial freefall.
And this financial stress exacerbates the mental health crisis exponentially. It creates a vicious, inescapable cycle.
Because you can't heal when you're starving.
You are too sick to work because of the traumatic workplace environment. But being sick means you literally cannot afford to live, which spikes your anxiety and depression, making you even sicker and further delaying any chance of recovery.
The system actively punishes the illness that it helped create.
That's exactly right.
And where is that union, Unite and BASA, during this financial freefall? The irony here is thick enough to choke on. Charles includes an email he received from Unite Membership Services.
What does the email say?
They contact him to inform him that because he is on sick leave and his pay has dropped below a certain threshold, his union contributions have been automatically suspended.
Okay, so they stopped taking his money.
But do they follow up by offering a hardship fund? Do they offer free legal counsel to fight the sick pay deductions?
Let me guess.
No.
They do not.
No. They offer him the opportunity to pay a reduced fee. They ask for £3.03 per month for a back-to-work membership, just to retain some basic benefits.
It feels almost dystopian.
Doesn't it?
You were drowning in the ocean, and the lifeguard rows a boat over to you, not to pull you out of the water, but to offer you a discounted subscription rate on swimming lessons while you actively choke on the waves.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
It demonstrates a profound structural disconnect between the idealistic purpose of a labor union, which is solidarity and protection, and its actual bureaucratic function as a subscription service in this specific instance.
And the financial hits just keep compounding for him. He details losing £4,000 when British Airways allegedly denied him permission to start a small side business while he was employed, cutting off another potential lifeline.
So he couldn't even try to make money elsewhere.
Nope. He also talks about the money lost on concert tickets. He lists them out: Mariah Carey, Lady Gaga, Ray. He bought these tickets trying to find some joy, some connection to his outside life, but he couldn't attend any of them.
Because of the panic attacks.
Yeah, he was too terrified of having another uncontrollable panic attack in a crowded public space and facing that humiliation all over again. His entire world had shrunk down to the size of his apartment.
Which brings us to the profound theme of total, crushing isolation. Because when the institution abandons you and the union abandons you, you ideally fall back on your social safety net.
But as we discussed at the very beginning regarding his childhood in the favela, Charles doesn't have one.
Right. He has no family to rely on.
He cut them off, having been forced to become an independent adult at the age of 8. His colleagues, the people he flew with, were supposed to be his community.
But when he decided he needed to fight back, when he desperately needed people to stand up and say, yes, I saw what happened to him, I saw the xenophobia, I saw the bullying, they all vanished.
He explicitly calls out his friends and colleagues in the manifesto. He even mentions those from his own communities, Brazilians and Portuguese, saying they flat out refuse to act as witnesses for him in court.
And we have to ask why. Why would his friends abandon him? It likely isn't because they didn't believe him,
No, he states that in private, they share their own horror stories with him.
but they are terrified. They were terrified of retaliation, of losing their own jobs, of ending up in the exact same financial ruin Charles is currently experiencing,
He calls them cowards in the text.
which is a harsh word born of deep pain, but it's a direct result of a corporate culture that rules through fear. Silence is the price of survival in that ecosystem. If you speak up for the drowning man, the ship leaves you behind too.
Silence has a price, and I have already paid more than my share. That's a direct, haunting quote from his manifesto. And it leads us to his ultimate goal with this document. He states clearly he is not writing this just to vent or for drama. He is actively seeking justice under English law.
He is laying down a massive challenge. He writes that he is looking for a lawyer in the UK who has the courage to face those two organizations, British Airways and BASA.
He wants a lawyer who isn't afraid.
Exactly. He wants to sue for non-pecuniary damages, as well as for the failure of duty of care regarding his human rights.
Just to clarify for anyone not deep in UK legal terminology, what exactly are non-pecuniary damages?
It's a legal term for damages that aren't strictly tied to a financial receipt. You're not just suing for a lost £100 wage deduction. You're suing for the pain, the suffering, the loss of enjoyment of life, and the psychological injury inflicted upon you.
So it covers the emotional and mental toll.
Yes, and it is notoriously difficult to prove and quantify, which is why he knows he needs a lawyer willing to take on a massive corporate entity.
He emphasizes the massive power dynamic at play here. He is one single man dealing with severe documented mental health issues, going up against a flagship corporation with essentially endless resources and legal teams.
It's a David and Goliath situation.
And he points out the utter absurdity of how they handle mental health at a corporate level. When he asked for a dedicated human being to speak with, instead of random hotlines where he had to repeat his trauma over and over, BA apparently directed him to an automated charity portal called Canada Water.
An automated portal.
Yes. And when he went to that portal and filled out their intake form, honestly, mentioning that he was experiencing suicidal thoughts, the automated system literally blocked him.
Oh my goodness. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the ultimate indictment of modern corporate mental health initiatives.
How so?
Companies love to tout their wellness programs. They provide links to third-party charities, mindfulness apps, or automated triage portals. It looks fantastic in a PR brochure. But how those automated triage algorithms actually work is insidious.
They don't actually help.
If a user clicks yes to suicidal ideation, the software platform often drops them or blocks them immediately.
Wait, why would they do that?
Because taking them on as a user creates a severe medical liability that the software company isn't insured to handle.
So the system is designed to reject the people who need it the absolute most.
Precisely. The algorithm is built to protect the liability of the software provider and the employer, not to save the life of the employee. When a human being is actually in crisis, pointing them to an automated web form that blocks them for being too high risk is not support.
It's just covering their own bases.
It is liability management disguised as care. Charles is using his manifesto to challenge that entire systemic illusion. He's demanding accountability from a machine that was meticulously designed by lawyers and HR departments to never be held accountable.
It is a devastating realization. Let's try to summarize the tragic arc of this deep dive.
Okay, where do we land?
We started with a young boy in a favela in Guarulhos, staring up at the sky, spending 20 years striving for a specific uniform, specific emblem of a dream. But when he finally grasps it, the reality of the job, the internal machinery of the institution, completely destroys his physical health, his financial stability, and his spirit.
And the most vital takeaway here is the contrast we established early on. It wasn't the industry of aviation that broke him.
Right, because he loved Ryanair and Norwegian.
He proved to those airlines that he could handle grueling hours, demanding passengers, and the physical toll of flying. What broke him was the specific culture of an institution that, in his experience, failed to see him as a human being.
It was the unchecked xenophobia, the systemic bullying, and the devastating bureaucratic lack of empathy when he finally cried out for help.
It's a stark reminder that we all interact with these massive corporations every single day, either as employees navigating their HR mazes or as consumers buying their tickets and sitting in their seats.
And when systems prioritize procedures, data collection, and liability over genuine human empathy, people fall through the cracks. They are ground into dust by the gears of the machine.
Knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied to our own lives. We have to look at our own workplaces, our own unions, our own structures of support.
Are they actually designed to help people in crisis? Or are they designed to protect the organization from the fallout of the crisis? Charles's story is a demand that we ask those deeply uncomfortable questions. I want to leave you with a final lingering thought today. Something to mull over as you go about your week. The next time you board a flight, the next time you walk down that narrow aisle and are greeted by a smiling flight attendant in a crisp, perfectly tailored uniform, ask yourself, what invisible weight are they carrying beneath that fabric?
That's a powerful question.
What battles have they fought with management, with their own finances, or with their own mental health just to stand there and offer you a drink? And if the very people who are responsible for keeping us safe in the sky are silently drowning in the systems built around them, who is supposed to be the oxygen mask for them?
A really sobering thought.
Thank you for joining us on this intense deep dive into the source material. We'll catch you next time.